But what about Christianity in relation to white supremacy? Where we hear a little bit about it here and there, but what's the relationship? How would you make sense of that?
It's a huge relationship. Every time you see a white Jesus, you see white supremacy. I full stop. I'm sorry. I I have no problem talking about this because if there's anything that's about white supremacy, it's Christianity. Because Christianity tells you that, you know, if you want to look at the Warner Salmon Jesus, who's got blonde hair and blue eyes, looks like a surfer boy, then that's who you should worship. And it's also in the ways in which we think about patriarchy. If you think about, you know, very conservative Christianity, it's white men who run things. It's not white women. White women benefit from that system within Christianity because they can be the moral avatars, right? But Christianity has a problem. It has a problem in whiteness, and part of that problem is embedded, you know, in something that, you know, Christians don't like to talk about: missionary activity. Let's go save those poor, benighted Africans and Asians and Filipinos and wherever we go, whether we're talking about Protestantism or Catholicism, and let's go give them the message of Jesus Christ and civilization, because those things go hand in hand, right? But the problem is that when people start to think about Christianity outside of a box of whiteness, that's when people get really nervous and start to wonder, well, you know, is that really Christianity? Was Jim Cone really right to talk about a Black theology and Black power? These are the kinds of questions we have to ask. I mean, Christianity can be appropriated in lots of different ways, but the ways in which it's been used to appropriate whiteness is I would say, very egregious.
Okay, so help us make sense of one of the things you talked about is missionizing, right, and evangelizing, and that's what your new book is about.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about your new book? And I mean, I'm assuming that part of what you're covering there is what we're seeing in America today, right? And this sort of allegiance to Trump through white evangelical Christians. And I don't know, I feel like a lot of people have questions as to why or how a Christian could continue to support Trump. So talk to us about that.
Well, I'm not actually talking about Trump. This is where I will do a little corrective here. This is a history book. This book is from the 19th century forward, about the history of white evangelicals and racism. So I will give you an example. When evangelicals tell their story, they like to tell the story about, you know, there's Charles Finney, we had the Great Awakening, we were abolitionists, we were temperance people, we did good stuff with missions. Then there was Billy Graham, and then, you know, we got to be moral and everything, and we had a nice president in President Bush, and then, you know, we supported Trump, and there's where everybody has a big question mark. What my book is about is telling you that racism has been at the foundation of white American evangelicalism, period, full stop. From slavery, when people believed in the Bible that Black people were enslaved because they were part of the curse of Ham, to the kinds of missionary activity that, you know, basically denigrated Native American and African American communities, to the kind of, you know, gentle, light racism of Billy Graham, when he says, oh, I will go and appear with the very racist Texas governor, you know, and not care that Martin Luther King asked me not to do so, you know, to that racism of him being on the tape with Nixon talking about Jews. I mean, all of those things are part and parcel of American evangelicalism. And I think that a lot of evangelicals want to give themselves a valorous history rather than the history that they really do have. I'm not surprised that they're for Trump. I mean, they're for Trump because Trump gives them the things that they think that they want, but it also has uncovered their basic white supremacist beliefs.
Right now, we're talking a little bit about the history of evangelicalism and how it relates to racism, and what Professor Butler is illuminating for us is it's part and parcel, right? It's always been there, and this is nothing new. And from what I'm hearing from you, it sounds like anyone who's read up on the subject shouldn't be surprised by what's happening right now.
No, but I think people are, because evangelicals have cloaked themselves in morality. They basically said, oh, we were we're pro-life, we are for the family, we don't want a lot of excessive spending, and we want, you know, a righteous and just world. Well, they want a righteous and just world with white people running it, specifically white men running it. And so what my book is trying to do is to show you these inflection points, the points in which this racism has really affected A, the history of evangelicalism, and B, the history of what has happened with race in America. So I'll give you a very short example I think that is worthwhile talking about. Bob Jones University, which is a fundamentalist university, the reason why we think about the manner in which the religious right came to be, we think about it because we think that it was about abortion. Well, that's partially true, but the real energizer was that Bob Jones University didn't want to let Black people in, namely Black men, because they didn't want interracial dating, essentially. And they got their tax exemption taken away from them in the 70s because of this. And so that was where lots of evangelical Christian schools who were all white in the South decided that what we call segregationist schools decided that they needed to start to advocate because they wanted to keep segregation going. It's the same reason why you see this charter school thing comes up. This is about segregation. Let's go put all these Black kids over here. Let's keep these white Christian schools for our kids and nobody else, right? So there's all these different ways in which, racism has affected American evangelicalism. I think about Billy Graham, who is, a singular figure in American religion, but he was the exemplar of whiteness throughout the world in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, and I think he came to a point where he was embarrassed about that. But when you think about his son, Franklin Graham, who was basically a birther from day one, talking about Obama, you have to start to think about what are the things that evangelicals say that don't line up with what they claim they believe. And how do we parse that out? And I think for evangelicals, especially evangelical historians, it's very difficult for them to see that racism. Every time I pick up a book about American evangelicalism, it's nothing but white guys. Maybe there's one or two Black people in it, might be a woman, but it's all white men defining what evangelicalism is. And they want to define it either theologically, they barely want to talk about culture, but they always ignore race. I have that big book on American evangelicalism that the woman who won the Pulitzer Prize for. And I went back in it to look to see how much it was about race in there because I'd read it and kind of cursory reading. And I was just stunned to see it was all about white people. There was nothing about Black evangelicals, which has a history, nothing. So evangelical means white in this country. And I think that we need to really start to grapple with that and throw out all of these theological, quadrilateral Bevington crap that everybody wants to hold on to and just say evangelicalism is about white people and white people trying to either resist people of color coming in or making people of color come in and be like them. They want people of color who are culturally white.